Welcome to DevOps Summit Canada 2021. My name is Ayelet Sachto, and I'm an SRE at GKE London team. But what you need to know about me is that I'm living and bleeding production in large scale for almost 2 decades now.
And I'm Dave Stanke. I'm a developer relations engineer with Google Cloud, focused on helping people succeed with DevOps and SRE. I also contributed to this year's Dora State of DevOps report.
Dora is the largest and longest running research project of its kind, providing an independent and tool-agnostic view into the practices and capabilities that drive IT performance. It's using strategic methods to present data-driven insight about the most effective and efficient way to develop and deliver technology. Dora aimed to answer the what. What capability should we improve? But how do we measure software delivery performance? In our research program, we found a valid and reliable way to do it. 2 metrics representing speed, lead time of change from version control to production, and deployment frequency. 2 stability metrics, change fail rate, when you push a change out, what percentage of the time do you need to remediate? And time to restore. How long does it take to remediate the problem? These 4 metrics, which can be applied to any kind of software delivery, includes framework, mobile, and so on. And those are also the metrics that both DevOps and SRE, site reliability engineering, advocates. To improve those, and not surprisingly enough, those are also the metrics that your customers care about too as well. And as we aim to be data-driven, here are some metrics to back it up. Elite performers have much more frequent deployments. They have a faster lead time from commit to deploy. They have lower failure rates and quicker recovery time. In this year report, we also found that change fail rate went from 7x lower to 3x lower, while for everything else, medium and lower performers, the gap had even widened. Dave, want to share what other changes we saw this year in the report?
Yeah, we saw that the lead time for changes on elites went from less than a day to less than an hour, and even the medium and low performers have generally increased their delivery rates. Everything is accelerating and the gap is widening. The elite performers, who are now make up 26%, I believe, of our survey, are really pulling ahead of the pack. When we say accelerate, we mean it. So let's dig into some of the things that we studied uniquely this year. Every year when we do the report, we do some deep dives on particular topics. And this year we studied some really interesting and timely things. So one thing we dug into this year is about cloud usage and how people use the cloud. So what would you say the cloud is?
I think it's a tool.
Okay.
More than anything, it's a tool that enables us to move faster and organization move faster.
When I say I have my photos on iCloud, am I using the cloud?
I think that even more than that, most people, when they're using even their iPhone, even not accessing photos, they are using the cloud without even noticing it.
Without even noticing.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that's a great point. The inverse can happen as well. You can use the cloud without noticing it, and you can use the cloud without benefiting from it, unfortunately. So one of the things that we've looked at within Dora is, what does it mean to use the cloud? Is that a thing? The cloud can mean a lot of different things. It can mean iCloud. It can mean something you use without noticing it. It could mean taking your on-prem devices or on-prem servers and copying directly up to the cloud, kind of getting the same thing that you already had, except you're paying someone else for it. There's some benefits there, don't get me wrong. But with the Dora research, what we've done is we've adopted this definition of what does the cloud really mean. When we say using the cloud, when we say taking advantage of the cloud, what do those words need to mean? And we're using a definition that came from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And what NIST says is there are 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing. That if you have these characteristics, you're really getting what technologists should be thinking about as what the cloud is. And if you don't have them all, you're not taking full advantage of the cloud, and the effort to move to the cloud may not be rewarded. So those 5 characteristics are on-demand self-service. That means that engineers and operators can self-service to get the resources they need automatically, as opposed to something like filing a ticket in a Jira system and waiting for someone else to forklift it over. Even if they're not literally provisioning physical hardware, if it takes that amount of time, it's not really the cloud. This year, we studied how people get, how to what extent people have access to these capabilities. Found that 73% of people have on-demand self-service, and that's up 16% from our previous study. The next capability here is broad network access, meaning that you can access your cloud from anywhere, from any platform, from any place. You can do it on the road from your laptop. You don't need a privileged connection into it, which has implications for security, and there are great ways to secure that kind of access, but it takes a different approach than saying, oh, well, I've got the T1 line to my backend. 74% of our respondents have that capability, which is up 14%. Resource pooling is meaning that the provider bin packs effectively the resources in a multi-tenant model, so that a common pool of hardware can be reassigned dynamically to as needed. 73% of folks have access to that, up 15%. Now, when that happens and you're reassigning and distributing resources to different users, rapid elasticity means that happens quickly, perhaps even automatically on demand. And that's 77%, up 18%. And finally, measured service. Really, the original promise of the cloud is a pay-as-you-go model. Pay for what you use, and don't pay for things that you're not going to use. And we have 78% of people, up 16%. So you can see that, as we know, cloud adoption is increasing across the industry. But importantly, cloud benefits are increasing. People are doing a better and better job of really taking advantage of the cloud to get the things that will help their business. I'm interested to know, Aya, in your experience working with cloud customers, where are they? Are they getting these advantages? And what are maybe some of the challenges of folks being able to take advantage of these capabilities of the cloud?
So that's a really good point. With a lot of customers, we see that they are adopting cloud, but not necessarily cloud native. And when we're talking about cloud native, then we are talking about all those benefits that you mentioned. So a lot of customers are benefiting from the on-demand self-service and the measured service and economy of scale. But when we're talking about elasticity, when we're talking about reliability and architectures that are focusing on engineering excellence, those are not the starting point, let's say, and that's actually expected when you are migrating your payload, when you are moving to cloud, you usually have maybe early adopters payloads. Maybe you have things that that are not greenfield, that you are just lift and shift them. But at some point, you want to think about also a strategy to adopt actually the benefit of using cloud and being more cloud native. And I think that also some of the benefit from the report is to emphasize what you can actually do in order to be more cloud native, to benefit from those advantages. So not just the cost and the growth, but also that engineering methods and practices. And as you just stated, we see an increase with that as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You can be cloud native, without being on the cloud. And sometimes that's a way to start. If folks have data centers and they don't want to turn down their expensive hardware just yet, we see a lot of people adopting something like Kubernetes, for example, which isn't the only way to be cloud native, but it certainly
helps.
It helps. Yeah. It encourages cloud native practices and sometimes even requires them. You can do that on-prem and really modernize applications, and that provides a much easier on-ramp to get them onto a cloud native hosting on the cloud itself.
And I think that sometimes people are using in the same breath being cloud native and automation, or benefit from the use of automation, even without talking about necessarily cloud platform by itself.
All right, let's talk about SRE. It's a topic near and dear to our hearts. Before I describe what we learned, Ayelet, I'm interested to hear, you have a lot of depth and experience in SRE. So from your perspective, what's DevOps?
I think the most frequent question, and there's actually a lot of answers, and no one answer to how to address it. But I think, at least when I'm talking about it, it's more about the methodology and how we approach things. So for me, when I'm talking about SRE, the set of principles, I'm also talking about a lot of the DevOps core philosophies around it. And sort of alluding to one of the things that we found in the research, how those philosophies goes hand in hand. And I think that it just showcase what we see in the field as well, what we see with customers. It's the what and hows that goes together versus different practices.
Absolutely. And I think that experience in the field and what we've seen inside Google motivated us really to start studying this more rigorously this year. We've looked at DevOps and SRE for a long time. They evolved in parallel. Really, one of them kind of more privately inside Google, the other one very publicly at conferences like this one. And what we've seen is that they look like they have a lot in common. They really share a lot of values, and that's led, however, to some confusion or even sometimes some contention, some shouting matches in the back of the bar of which one's better, which one you should do. And our general approach has been, to your point, that you kind of can do both and maybe should do both. We wanted to go that step further this year to say, well, what is the formal interaction between these? And so what we did for the first time in the State of DevOps analysis is we took SRE practices. What we did is we took the book. I gotta show the book. We took the book and we distilled it down to a set of things that people do when they practice SRE, and we kind of genericized it. We took out a lot of the specific language that we use, and instead just said, what do you do? Things like, do you have a defined protocol for incident response? Do you practice preparedness drills? Various aspects of that. And then we asked people that alongside all of the other DevOps questions that we have asked. And what we found, kind of happily, is that SRE complements DevOps. SRE really is consistent and congruent, and that teams that practice SRE have better business outcomes than those that don't. So really, it's a force multiplier for DevOps practices. The teams that succeed on our 4 key metrics of software delivery, if they also implement reliability practices, they have 1.8 times more likely outcomes or better business outcomes. So really, the best teams are the ones that are kind of firing on all cylinders. Another thing that we found is that when we look at this kind of in generic language, take it out of the specifics of how SRE might be practiced at Google or production engineering might be practiced at Facebook, we find that these modern operational practices are really widespread. So 52% of organizations are practicing SRE to some extent. And It's not just something for the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. Clearly, there's benefit here for organizations of all kinds, and we found that there was benefit for performers at all levels. So, I think what we've done is we've really kind of validated our hypothesis that SRE implements DevOps, and we have seen, in fact, that the framework and the tools provided by SRE are very much part of a healthy DevOps practice.
And if I can add to that, I think that when you said about people are shouting about which one is better and things like that, this is also why I sort of chose my words carefully when I talk about definitions, because people actually sometimes respond even emotionally to those practices, but at its core, both SRE and DevOps goes hand in hand with a very common objective, which is happy customers. And we talk again and again about the starting point of implementing DevOps practices. To implement SRE methodology is all about happy customers, where we draw the line, how we make sure that our customers are happy, and what it means that our customers are happy in regard to our service.
Yeah, I have a background in product management, and this is what got me so excited when I started exploring SRE, is to see that it's really a customer-oriented framework for operations. And really, it's the ultimate feedback loop in some ways. We talk about the SDLC kind of going from left to right, starting from ideas to code to deployment to operations. But the way that SRE really approaches operations, it says, customers, right? The ones who are on the far left of the SDLC when we're trying to deliver value to, they inform how we do operations. And in fact, I think there's a really essential feedback loop, which is all about DevOps, right? DevOps loves feedback loops, essential feedback loop from SREs back into product to say, here's what we've learned about our customers. Now let's incorporate that into our prioritization for both what we build and how we build it.
And I don't want to focus too much about SRE, but I think that is one of the most important things, that SRE will be empowered and be able to say, we need to stop development at the moment, or more correctly, deployment at the moment, and prioritize reliability versus velocity to make our customer happy. So we won't impact the customer experience.
Yeah, as a last note on this topic, and yes, we could go on and on, I'll mention that exactly what you said, that sort of seat at the table we talk about, and empowered operations to say, listen, for the quality of our service as delivered, we need to prioritize some reliability work right now. That's one of the things we asked about in the survey and found, yes, that teams that have that kind of internal control mechanism, which SRE really provides a lot of framework for, those teams are delivering more reliable software and succeeding more as a business. All right, let's talk about security. So security is a hot topic, as it should be. Supply chain attacks have gone up dramatically in the last couple of years. And that means that vulnerabilities can enter your software supply chain at any point, from open source packages to developer injected code to vulnerabilities in tooling. Yeah, we should be a little scared. The good news is there are ways to mitigate this. And the big thing, that a phrase that we've used in DevOps from the beginning, shift left, right? And in particular, we talk a lot about shifting left on security. This year, we started talking about shifting left on reliability too. Yeah. But shifting left on security means to incorporate security work all the way through your development process, embedding it into the understandings of developers, having automated processes that will handle security as well. And what we found is that teams that integrate security best practices are more likely to meet their organizational goals. So security is not something that we choose instead of shipping features or instead of succeeding on behalf of our businesses. It's actually something that augments our ability to do that. And as you can see, reliability is augmented by folks who are doing a great job of integrating security throughout their process.
Yeah, and I sort of have to say, a lot of the time people are talking about security versus reliability, or security and privacy compared to reliability. And I think it's not separate. It's again, like SRE and DevOps, it goes hand in hand. You cannot be reliable but not secure. You cannot be reliable but not provide privacy to your customers. So I think that the foundations is of reliability is being secure and protect the privacy of your customers and your users. And that's why I think that shifting left actually aligning together with the shift in reliability.
Yeah, at Google, we have security experts, we have reliability experts. The goal of both of those, classes of experts is really to empower the software development teams, the product teams, to deliver secure, reliable systems. And in both cases, it's about guardrails, it's about education, it's about consultation. And another way that these things I think are similar in terms of empowering the flow of value to customers is that an incident is similar, whether it's a reliability incident or a security incident. Sometimes we might call on some different people and we might have different mitigations, but the institutional ability to have resilience against those incidents and practice the response to those incidents really is something that these two sides of that coin can amplify each other.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about documentation?
Yeah, actually one of my, I don't know if to say my favorite, but definitely one of the top finding and points from this report.
Yeah, so this year we really studied documentation in depth, and we studied internal documentation by that, which means documentation that's facing developers, right? A lot of times this is seen as kind of a chore, right? Kind of, again, something like, well, should I really make our application great, or should I do some documentation? What we found is that there is no or. To make your application great, to deliver for your users, we really need quality documentation. And you'll find in this year's report that there was, we talked about what makes quality documentation. We have some great recommendations about what quality documentation is. We found that teams that are doing that are more likely to have secure practices, are more likely to reach the reliability target, more likely to get those benefits of the cloud that we looked at. So documentation really unlocks a lot of what teams need to do in general. And again, falling back to my product management background, I'm a big believer that, especially in a developer-facing context, documentation is the product. Documentation is how people understand what this thing can do for them, understand the use cases and the patterns for it. And if your documentation doesn't help them use the product, then you have a flawed product. So really developing these things together, and again, encouraging the incorporation of the developers of that product itself to maintain the documentation is a really powerful way to ensure that the product itself is presenting itself and delivering itself to the users. What do you find in SRE world? What do you do? What's your take on documentation from an SRE perspective?
So 2 points in that regard. One is from a practical side, we actually recommend people to accommodate in their sprint, in their stories for time for documentation, so they won't forget about it. And we do the same thing with also observability metrics and logging and things like that, to think about the troubleshooting aspect as well, because as people in DevOps know, production is only the beginning of the cycle. We want it to be part of their day-to-day from the process side, that we have time dedicated to also make sure that we have the right documentation. From the other side is external documentation, and you sort of alluded it with developers. It's all about being perceived as reliable. So what we found with customers is that because it's about perception, having good documentation And good communication, like external communication, sometimes is more critical than our uptime. Because if our documentation for our developers is not good, then they think that maybe there's a problem, maybe we are perceived as less reliable than we really are, because it's our frontal interface with them. Similarly, if we have an incident, even if it's very minor, but we didn't communicate it, we are losing the trust of our users. So there's a lot of aspects about reliability that are not necessarily just uptime or latency or even data quality. So please be aware of the importance of documentation. And also, as a developer, as an engineer, think about it as the person that will need to resolve that feature. Think about it in like 3 months. Will you remember what it does if you didn't make the code very readable or you didn't document it properly? So try to put yourself in the reader's shoes in the next incident.
It's a really great point that a core principle of SRE is that reliability is in the eye of the beholder. The user is the one that defines whether you're reliable or not. Of course, we can do a lot of things to try and help the user see us as reliable, but if documentation, communication is all part of their experience of our system, and as exactly like you say, it's really more important to our business goals that we are understood to be reliable, more so even than that we are reliable. Of course, the best way to be understood to be reliable is to be reliable. But if you don't, connect that to the user the right way, they can't appreciate it. All right. Finally, we saved the most important topic for last. A deep dive we did on this year's study is we looked at culture. And we find that culture is a hugely important lever impacting software delivery performance, business performance, and human outcomes. Things like predicting team longevity and reducing burnout. So culture, there's a lot of factors that contribute to culture, right? How does culture happen? Culture is sort of an emergent property of the way people communicate, the way we structure our teams. So in terms of structuring teams, we find that high performance comes from having cross-functional teams, a product team that has all of the capabilities within it to deliver to their user and can operate autonomously, often within boundaries, within guardrails, but autonomously to achieve things. Where different specialties are on that team, but they're all aligned around the same organizational goal. And on the way people work together, we have found that high performance is predicted by having what we call a generative culture, a culture where new information promotes investigation and collaboration to revise the system, where people really have a lot of shared trust. Another thing we looked at this year, of course, was about the pandemic and what happened from COVID and what its effect was on people's jobs. Ayelet, you want to tell us a little about what we learned about culture from our investigation?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that this is very much aligned with what we experience in the field, that having the right culture, empowering culture, in general, and accepting failure for as normal, for example, require that cultural change. And from COVID perspective, we found that healthy team culture mitigate burnout during challenging circumstances like having a global pandemic. So team culture make a large difference to the team's ability to deliver software and meeting the organizational goals. Inclusive teams with the right culture also experience less burnout than other teams. So if your teams are experiencing burnout, then it will be a good indication to think about the culture and do you have the right toolkit empowering your team and having a learning environment as well.
Yeah, we may not have seen the pandemic coming, but we knew that challenges will always happen. And the best way to insulate our teams against future challenges is to have that culture of trust and communication and a shared sense of learning together. All right, let's wrap up by offering some pointers. There is so much more to explore, so much richness of things that we've learned. So I really would encourage everyone to check out cloud.google.com/DevOps, where you'll be able to find the State of DevOps report from this year. Also the previous years, which have a lot of different deep dives, a lot of interesting topics that go into particular, side notes and little bits of things that you can apply. They're all really interesting. Check out the quick check tool. This is something that just in a couple of minutes, you can assess your performance on the 4 key metrics and compare yourself against others in your industry and look at the capability catalog. All of these capabilities we've discussed, from technical things like CI and trunk-based development, to process things like streamlined change management, to culture, like the generative culture. All of those have their own articles within our capability catalog, tell you a little bit about why it's important, how to measure it, and how to get started making positive change. With that, we will say thank you.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure being here with you at Canada DevOps. We wish we could be in person maybe next year, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.